Okay, today we're going to discuss something a little bit more unusual. We're going to discuss the discovery of nothing. Quite literally, nothing. Or I guess more specifically, it's a discovery of something that's supposed to be there, but when astronomers analyzed it using various telescopes, they basically discovered absolutely nothing in this particular region of space. And the thing is, this is actually a really important and a really exciting discovery of something that was hypothetical and was actually predicted to exist back in 2017. And so, hello wonderful person, this is Anton. In this video we're going to discuss the first ever discovery and the first confirmation of an object referred to as REHLIC, specifically Cloud 9. A cloud of nothing that seems to represent some kind of a failed object that was supposed to form but just never did. And well, here's the actual picture of what we're discussing today. And so yeah, there is something here, something that is visible, but not what astronomers expected to see. And so let's discuss this in a bit more detail and talk about the theory behind this, and of course discuss why this Cloud 9 is so important. But normally in astronomy we usually get very excited when we find new types of stars, very bright or unusual galaxies, or of course all sorts of different black holes. But in an extremely recent study I've just showed you, scientists were using Hubble Space Telescope to look at a very specific spot near an extremely popular galaxy. This very beautiful galaxy you see right here referred to as Messier 94. This is actually a galaxy that's been analyzed for many decades, and it's one of the most beautiful images you can find in the night skies. And well, one of the main reasons for this initial observation was to try to find partner galaxies or satellite galaxies, and especially smaller dwarf galaxies that are usually really difficult to find. Which is why scientists looked at this very specific spot extremely close to Messier 94, but despite expecting to find something, they actually found absolutely no stars. And well, it turns out that this was a super exciting discovery of, once again, nothing. But why exactly is lack of stars such a big deal? Well, it turns out that this empty patch of space, now nicknamed Cloud 9, and here's literally what it looks like in the optical light, represents the first confirmed example of an idea referred to as REHLIC, something that was originally proposed back in 2016-2017, with the word REHLIC being an acronym for Reionization Limited HI Clouds. In simpler terms, this was a failed galaxy, a primordial building block from the early universe that has literally remained exactly the same for 13 billion years, just containing gas and not forming a single star. Which of course means that this is not really nothing as much as it's something that just never really became an actual galaxy. And so in this video, we're going to discuss the exact details from this new study, including some of the most recent results from the Hubble Space Telescope that basically produced this image. And that's of course in order to understand why this starless cloud is now an extremely important window into the dark universe and may tell us a lot about the nature of dark matter and a lot of other cosmic mysteries. And so let's discuss these relics first and exactly what this Cloud 9 seems to be. First of all, this is located about 14 to 16 million light years away from us. It's not entirely clear how far because, once again, there's basically nothing here except for diffuse gas. But because this is very close to M94, the very well-known spiral galaxy, it's assumed to be orbiting around it. And this cloud was initially spotted approximately 3 years ago by the Chinese FAST telescope, the largest radio telescope in the world. But at that time it was just the 9th entry in the list of gas clouds discovered close to M94, which is basically why it's called Cloud 9. And so when astronomers took a look at this cloud with additional radio telescopes such as Very Large Array in the US, they discovered a very distinct and compact and actually nearly spherical cloud of neutral hydrogen gas. It roughly looked something like this. And this cloud was approximately 5,000 light years across, so approximately the same size as a typical dwarf galaxy. But here's the interesting part. Based on the way gas is moving here, scientists could then calculate how much gravity it seems to possess in order to keep this whole structure together, because otherwise it would just completely fall apart. And well, what they discovered here is that hydrogen gas seems to weigh approximately 1 million solar masses, but that was definitely not enough to keep this cloud from falling apart. And so in order to become so compact and in order to maintain its spherical shape, it had to contain a massive amount of invisible dark matter. And here we're talking about not 1 million but 5 billion solar masses. So basically at least 5,000 times as much. Which basically makes Cloud 9 a dark matter dominated object, or kind of like a huge ball of dark matter with just a little bit of hydrogen gas trapped inside. And intriguingly, in the last couple of years, we've actually had a few similar discoveries, even as close as the Milky Way galaxy. You can learn about one of the more recent and super unusual discoveries in one of the videos in the description. But for the past 3 years, there was this big if. Astronomers were not entirely sure if this was a starless cloud, or if this was just a very unusual dwarf galaxy that was super faint, like the one that I've discussed previously, near the Milky Way. And so here they had to conduct additional observations because ground-based telescopes were just not sensitive enough. And that's exactly what this recent study achieved. Here they used Hubble's Advanced Camera for Surveys in order to stare at this cloud for some time and to try to uncover any possible stars. Here they were looking for any population of stars, even tiny ones, using the technique that has actually discovered stars in a lot of very dark galaxies around us. One example is the Leo T galaxy, extremely close to the Milky Way, which represents one of the dimmest known galaxies near us, but does contain stars visible in this image. And so if Cloud 9 was similar and contained at least some stars, in this case at least 10,000 solar masses worth of stars, Hubble would have definitely seen them and would then be classified as a dark dwarf galaxy, or a diffuse dwarf galaxy depending on its size. But instead, so far, Hubble seems to have found absolutely nothing. There were actually a few dots in the image, but the team confirmed that these were extremely distant galaxies, not stars. And so by ruling out the existence of stars in this object, they essentially confirmed that Cloud 9 is a completely new type of an object that was only hypothetical until now. This officially made it a relic. A relic from the early universe that survived the epoch of reionization, but unfortunately never really managed to create any stars. And so here, surprisingly, by discovering nothing, they actually did discover something absolutely incredible. But why exactly does this matter, and why is this such an important discovery for cosmologists? Well, first of all, this is a massive piece of evidence for the lambda CDM model that a lot of modern physics is based on. This is of course the main model we use to explain all stars, all galaxies, and all galactic clusters in the entire universe. And according to this model, the universe should have been filled with millions and millions of small dark matter halos, most of which then served as a kind of a scaffold for the rest of the galaxy to form around. So essentially, it's really the dark matter halos that potentially served as the foundation for the formation of all galaxies we see. In essence, first you had the dark matter halo, then a bunch of gas orbiting in the center, and then the black hole, which would then result in the formation of a central black hole, which eventually led to formation of different stars as the gas in the galaxy became denser and denser and created the right conditions for stars to form. But of course, until now this was more or less hypothetical. As a matter of fact, when we look through various telescopes, we actually see far fewer smaller galaxies than the model predicts. For example, for the Milky Way galaxy, the model predicts at least 500 different partners or dwarf galaxies, but so far we've only discovered approximately 50. This is often referred to as the missing satellites problem. And a lot of different papers tried to explain this one way or another, but for the most part none of the explanations had any evidence. But this discovery provides us with one crucial piece of evidence that a lot of scientists have been looking for. It suggests that the missing galaxies aren't actually missing, they just never really formed stars. Or essentially they never became galaxies and are still basically these dark matter halos with gas trapped inside, but just no stars and possibly even no black hole. So I guess you can think of them as abandoned houses in the galactic neighborhood, or even houses that nobody ever moved into. Kind of like those ghost cities in China, for example, where they build a bunch of apartments and nobody ever moved in. But for this object there's actually something else exciting. It seems to exist in a very specific sweet spot of mass. And specifically, if it was a little bit heavier, over 5 billion solar masses in mass, here the gravity would have been strong enough to crush the gas toward the center, eventually making it so hot that it would then form some stars and possibly form a massive black hole. In essence, it would create a normal dwarf galaxy. But if it was much lighter, the gas would have been stripped away by radiation or RAM pressure from a lot of nearby galaxies close to Messier 94. And so here it seems to have just enough mass to maintain its shape and to remain as a compact, spherical object for over 13 billion years. And because it sits at this threshold, this presents us with the perfect laboratory to study the mysterious dark matter, especially because there's really no stars here. In regular galaxies, as stars go supernova, they usually create a lot of outflow and blow a lot of gas around. This actually makes it hard to see exactly how dark matter is behaving. But this is a pristine object, where the gas very likely stayed this way since the beginning of the universe, and there are no stars to influence anything or to get in the way, which means that it shows us exactly what the universe looked like when all of this started, and will probably answer so many questions about the evolution of galaxies, and of course that mysterious dark matter stuff. But on top of this, some of the recent data from the Very Large Array also showed that this cloud seems to be slightly distorted. It's not a perfect sphere, and it looks like something did push it a little bit as it moves through space very close to the galaxy M94, which confirms that this is probably an object in orbit around mass E94 and would have actually become a typical satellite galaxy if it had a little bit more mass. But obviously, because this is such a recent discovery, there is still so much to learn. As a matter of fact, scientists are now focusing on at least 3 separate things. First, they want to use James Webb Space Telescope to look even deeper into this object, just in case there are stars and maybe they were missed by Hubble. Second, they want to look for a very specific type of glow referred to as hydrogen alpha emission. This should be visible around the edges of the cloud, and it would then tell us a little bit more about radiation in the area, because it's usually produced when hydrogen atoms transition from one energy state to the other. And so once again, it can tell us if there are any stars in the region. Lastly, they also want to use computer simulations to see if the distorted shape of this cloud matches what we expect from the REHLICs that have been influenced by larger galaxies that they seem to orbit. Basically, they want to see if the theory seems to match the observational evidence. But nevertheless, this is still a pretty huge win for the modern theoretical physics. It essentially shows us that even a failed galaxy can serve as a successful proof of how we believe the universe is put together. And so even though this is a very unusual object we've detected so far, representing the boundary between a successful galaxy and a prominent cloud of gas, one day it might also help us answer the questions about the mysterious dark matter, and even help us discover very similar objects very close to the Milky Way. But as I mentioned, some very similar objects have been already discovered around Milky Way not so long ago. As a matter of fact, this concept of dark galaxies, even though it was hypothetical before, is now becoming a reality. So here we're talking about galaxies mostly dominated by dark matter and containing some gas, but usually almost no stars. And one of the more exciting such objects was the object referred to as Nube that we discussed back in 2023. But even more recently, we've talked about the Smith's Cloud, a really bizarre interstellar cloud that's actually passing through the Milky Way that seems to be also maybe some kind of a relic. It's actually not entirely certain what this is yet, but it seems to be a little bit more than a gas cloud once again. You can learn more about this in one of the previous videos in the description. But I guess for now that's pretty much all we know. We'll definitely come back and discuss the subject in some of the future videos once there are some additional discoveries. But until then, thank you for watching, subscribe, come back tomorrow to learn something else, support the channel on Patreon where you can find additional videos without any ads and can DM me directly, or by joining channel membership that grants you early access. You can also support this channel by buying the Wonderful Person t-shirt in the description below. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye bye.